Thank you so much, John. Man, we appreciate you, blessing us with your presence, man. I always tell
Oh,
everybody I know you gotta be the greatest shooter that this scene come through Louisville, shoot 360 history. Okay. Nobody's greater than you,
you,
okay?
Nobody's made more
no,
shots.
you all
Huh?
changed my life at Shoot 360. I remember I was looking for. I started playing at the Y. I was pre-diabetic, and I just couldn't do the whole treadmill thing. I'll play basketball and started playing regularly and was looking for a league and somehow found Shoot 360 and it was nearby. So they said, sign up, sign up on the app and then come in. We'll take you through. And when I got there, they said, you, we welcome you here. We have one other person who's actually your age, even a little older, and we're glad you're here. And they were talking a little loud, like I couldn't hear them. I said, I can hear you fine. Just just want to shoot like everybody else. And and Luke took me around, and boy, as soon as I left, I told some friends the next morning. I said, "Well, I know what my new addiction's going to be," and I think I told Luke. I said I'm definitely not the most talented, but no one will out obsess me here. I said I'll be your best customer probably for the foreseeable future, and I love it. It's if you like basketball and you haven't checked out Shoot 360, you're missing out big time. So, big shout
Yeah.
out to you all and to Dean and Peyton. And it's a great place if you love basketball and want to get better. It's a great community you all have created. And thank you for being so welcoming to me.
Oh, we appreciate
Yeah,
any time that you come in. Like
yeah.
anybody that's working there, we could be having the worst day ever, but as soon as you walk in, like you could be having a terrible day. We don't know it. You have the biggest smile on your face, and everybody's like,
Yeah.
"Yes, Mr. John's
Mm,
here, Mr. John." And it's
Well,
like
mm.
you enjoy talking to people, and everybody enjoys talking to you. They can't wait to see you come in every time. So we're
well,
Mm.
very, very
and
lucky to have you on the show.
I love it, and you all even inspired me. I played in two 60 and over tournaments, one in Atlanta and one in Florida the last few months, and the one in Florida, I got to play. Let me see if I can. Billy Thompson, the former U of L star, was on the
Oh yeah.
opposing team. And so I got to shake his hand. I even got to guard him a little. He runs a ministry now. And I
Okay.
told him before the game, I said, my recollection is Jesus talked an awful lot about mercy. So I hope it's going to be a test of your faith, how much mercy you show me.
How do we look out there? I know
Yeah,
you.
they
You're
won by
making some
50,
shots.
but we had a great time. So,
Okay. Oh shoot, Billy Thompson. It's probably hard to stop that guy no matter what.
yeah, but
Man.
rest, yeah, but we had a great time, and it's a fun league, and there were even 70 and over, and they had 480 and over teams. So
Dang.
uh, believe it or not. So I thought I just had 3 or 4 more years. I may have 20 more years to shoot
Yeah, you're just getting
360.
stuck. You're in
So
your prime
yeah,
right now.
Yeah,
just getting
yeah,
warmed
man.
up.
For
Well, we
sure.
appreciate you for
Yeah,
joining us today. We're going to be
yeah,
talking about this. It's been 50 years since the
yeah,
ABA NBA merger, and obviously you're deeply ingrained with the Kentucky Colonels. And we thought there would be no better time to have you on the show. And that's why I talked to you a couple
yeah.
weeks ago. I was watching the Soul Power documentary, "The
Yes.
Legend of the American Basketball Association" on Prime Video. And I got
Yeah.
to episode 3, and I'm sitting there watching it with my dad, and they're talking about the Kentucky Colonels. And then none other than John Y. Brown III walks on the screen. I was like, I see this guy every single day. And that's the first time I knew that you guys were involved with the Colonels,
Yeah.
but that's the first time really hearing the entire story behind that. So looking
Yeah.
back on that documentary, just what are your whole thoughts on it?
I'm so glad they did that because, I think Winston Churchill, I believe it was, said history is often written by the victors, and the history of pro basketball was the NBA, but the ABA And the merger that happened 50 years ago was probably one of the most important historical events in basketball history, because the ABA really transformed the NBA. I don't think that's too strong a word. Back in the 70s, pro football and pro baseball dominated sports media, and the NBA was a distant third. But the ABA had more of a street ball feel to it. They had the 3-point rule. It was run and gun. It was the slam dunk contest. We had colorful players that made basketball fun, and they were I think, closer to the fans too. And they brought all that into the NBA, and it's sort of, when we were first approached about the movie, I wrote them a long email telling them how excited I was that they were going to do this, how meaningful it would be to so many people who remember the ABA well. And I said something like, watching the NBA back then was like watching basketball in black and white, and watching the ABA was like watching basketball in Technicolor. So I still like that. I mean, it was fun. It was exciting. It was electrifying at times. And they had, players like Dr. J, he was the predecessor to, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and who we wouldn't have Steph Curry without the 3-point line. So I think it's a story that never got told well or fully, and all the credit to Coach George Karl, who decided it was time, and this was going to be part of his legacy, and he put a team of young filmmakers together and just said, "This is a great story. It will tell itself. Just go to the people who lived it and get to work." And they worked really hard, and I thought they did a great job. They didn't pull any punches. They told all of the story, but they told it well. And it was the first time it sort of got told by the ABA rather than the NBA. And they did a wonderful job with the Colonels, and it sort of felt like a sort of vindication and a time of pride. Even 50 years later, it's never too late for something like this. And one of the most telling things about the significance of the ABA is when the year after merger, there were 18 existing NBA teams and 4 ABA teams merged. And then there were a few other ABA players from the dispersal draft who came over. But that year in the All-Star game, 10 of the 24 All-Stars were ABA players. The leading half, I think 4 or 5 of the top 10 scorers were ABA players. 4 or 5 of the top 10 in rebounding were ABA players. The leader in assists was from the ABA. Leader in steals was from the ABA. And I believe 4 of the 10 starters in the finals that year were from the ABA. So they came in and took the league by storm. And they were always the NBA kind of was dismissive of them and caricatured them because they didn't want them to be the serious threat that they were. And each year the ABA got better. They knew, and they wanted them. And I think in those final years, the best ABA teams were every bit as good, and some were better than the best NBA teams.
Yeah, I thought that documentary did a great job of somebody that obviously wasn't around for that era. I've seen the red, white, and blue basketball, known about just the history of it, but I never knew Connie Hawkins. I never knew like the story behind Kareem and everything. So it was really cool just to see that legacy kind of live on for, like, I'm a sports junkie. I love, if I'm not watching live sports, I'm watching like documentaries, and that's kind of how I stumbled upon that. So it was really cool to keep all those legacies alive. And you mentioned the 3-point contest and the dunk contest, and I think Terrence actually had a question about those.
Yeah. So John, so the ABA is credited to introducing innovations, that basically changed basketball forever. The 3-point line, slam dunk contest, which I've won, by the way. I've won one of those.
Derby City Classic right there.
There we go. There we go. All
right. So can you explain how that idea actually came together? And did anybody realize that it would become such an iconic event later on?
Yeah, there was. So the ABA often gets the credit, and I think that's very fair, rightfully so, because they made the 3-point line famous. But there was actually another league called the ABL a few years before the ABA that didn't last long at all, that experimented with the 3-point line. And the ABA liked it, and they wanted to be a little different, a little more fun. They had to differentiate themselves from the NBA somehow. And so they adopted it. Um, I, I, I don't know if it was the exact measurements that it is now, but it was pretty close. And but it wasn't used nearly as much as today. I don't know the exact statistics, but I think some teams 40% of their shots are 3-pointers, or 40% of their points come from the 3-point line. That was kind of unthinkable in the ABA. It was more of a surprise shot, or maybe desperation shot, or if you were on a run, kind of capping off a run. The the leading 3-point shooters, and one was Louis Dampier, the all-time leading 3-point shooter in the ABA for the Colonel Star, and all-time leading scorer too. He might. It was a big deal. I mean, he would take 4 or 5, maybe 4 3-pointers a game, something like that, and it was a big deal. But it was really exciting, and and it made the game more fun. It was a little easier to catch up. If you were down, you were never quite out of it. I mean, even if you were down 6 points with a minute left, that's just 2 3-pointers, so you're still in the game. Under the old NBA rules, kind of out of it at that point. It's going to be tough, especially with a shot clock. And then with the slam dunk contest that you won, they the AVA had kind of fallen on hard times financially, and I think it was either the last All-Star game. I think it was the last All-Star game the ABA had, because the next to last one I was a ball boy in San Antonio, and I remember serving water to the players during timeouts, and my hand slipped as I was handing Dr. J a little cup of water, and it spilled on him, and I was like, oh, I was mortified. But he's such a great guy. He said, "Don't worry about that. Just bring me champagne next time," which was great for a nervous kid who thought he just totally screwed up the one little job he had. But I think it was the last All-Star game in the ABA. They couldn't afford an expensive halftime show, so they tried to come up with, what could we do instead? And they came up with this idea of a slam dunk contest, and Artis Gilmore was in it. Maybe Larry Keenan from the Nets, Dr. J was, and David Thompson, and I think George Gervin. And by the way, George Gervin, if he had been around today, the NBA championship might have come out a little different this time. He had been playing for the Spurs, but that's another story.
Man, I'll tell you.
David Thompson was this amazing athlete that the ABA was lucky enough to draft out of North Carolina. Legend had it that he could pull a dime off the top of a backboard, had the greatest vertical leap anybody playing pro ball, and he did a 360 dunk, and I think people thought, after they hadn't seen that before, and they thought it's over. He's going to win this. And then Dr. J, it was his turn, and he did the usual Dr. J stuff. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, but it was, enough to where he had kind of closed the gap. And then for his last shot, it was going to have to be better than the 360. And he goes to the free throw line and then turns around and marks his steps all the way back to the other free throw line. And people are going, what's happening here? What's going on? And then as he starts to run toward the goal, they see what he's doing. And he takes off from the free throw line. and dunks it. And everybody knew that doctor's still in charge.
So
Yes.
he obviously the ABA also had like Rick Barry as well. Was
Yeah.
Dr. J, was he your Michael Jordan growing up?
Yes, he was, and he still is. I love Michael Jordan. There's no one that's been more dominant as pro basketball player, more fiercely competitive or talent. But there'll never be another Dr. J. There'll probably never be another Michael Jordan. But you know how it is. I was in awe of Dr. J. I mean, he did things you've just never seen before, and he did it so elegantly. And some of these, drives to the basket, and he would just take the ball and go underneath the basket and around and just keep going. And as players would describe him, he would go up and they would go up to try to block him, and he would go up some more and they would go up, and then they would start coming down, and Dr. J was still going up. And he would just hang there. And there's a great documentary about him on YouTube. And when he came to play at Rucker Park, and there were more people that came out to see him play then than anyone. You had people sitting in trees and on apartment ledges, and he was just a phenom. And he became the star of the ABA, and he really embodied everything great about the ABA. He was a showman, but he was there to win, but he was a class act too. And I don't know if this made the movie or not, but I remember hearing about it or seeing it, where the last season the Nets are playing in San Antonio, and everybody knows the league is really struggling and may or may not make it. And a few hours before the game, Dr. J goes over to Angelo Drosos, who's the owner of the Spurs office, and says, what can I do to help save the league? How can we work together? I mean, and that there was a brotherhood in the ABA. First off, there were usually 8 or 9 teams. They would play 84 games a year. That's a lot. You play a lot. You play each other a lot, so you get to know each other. But it's also season to season. You don't know. We're going to be back next year, maybe. Hope so. And everybody has to, work hard, try to help sell those season tickets. But there was a camaraderie and a brotherhood, a kind of a fraternity in the ABA that I think the NBA didn't have. And Dr. J said, he brought 2 things to the NBA that hopefully his artistry as a basketball player, certainly, but also that camaraderie and brotherhood from the ABA, of being a mentor, being mentored, being connected to the players. They're your brothers. They're not just an opponent or a teammate. And I think that's one of the things that's hard to talk about, maybe, but that made the ABA so special to those who, played in the league and lived through it as, or was just a fan like myself.
You talked about like the camaraderie between the whole league in general, and like the biggest what if in ABA history was then Lou Alcindor, when he was coming out of college, deciding if he was going to go to the ABA and NBA. And it seemed like obviously the teams didn't want the New York Nets to win the championship. Those teams, like the Kentucky Colonels, want to win the Pacers want to win the championship. But if you've got to get Lou Alcindor, you're okay with him going to New York because you know how much it's going to benefit the league overall. What do you really remember from the Kareem time?
Honestly, I'd love to pretend like I remembered all that. I was 10 at the time, and I did not know this story until the documentary. But I asked a lot of questions about it afterwards, because what a missed opportunity. What I was told, and I think they talk a lot about this in the documentary, so the ABA had set it up. They knew Kareem wanted to play in New York, and so they allowed the Nets to draft him. And then the league got together, the owners, I think, all pitched in, and they gave George Mikan, the commissioner, $1 million check to hand deliver to Lou Alcindor if he signed with the ABA. I don't know what happened, but apparently the check never got delivered. And I've heard several different stories, but the one that seems to add up, make the most sense, was Mikan didn't offer it because he didn't think he needed to. He thought Lou Alcindor was going to come to the Nets. So he thought he was saving money. And you have to understand, and this is something that I didn't understand until I saw the movie, there was a different mindset back then with managers, owners, and players that you saw it even more so, I think, in the NBA, but it obviously spilled over to the ABA too, where they felt like the owners or the managers were calling the shots, at least in the late 60s, early 70s. And then you started to get these marquee players where they're like, no, I don't think so. That's not going to be good enough. I'm going to need more than that. Or no, this is what we're going to do. Where the players really started to call the shots. But I think that's what happened. And when they interviewed Lou Alcindor after he made his choice, he said he talked to both leagues and he just had a better feeling about there's something, I can't remember the way he worded it, but he said something along the lines of, the ABA, I didn't feel like they were shooting straight with me quite. And Lou Alcindor's a brilliant man and a generational basketball player. And I think his instincts were right, unfortunately. But had the ABA gotten Kareem and then Dr. J and David Thompson, and they already had all these other great players, basketball history would be different, I think.
That's we were talking up at 360. I think instead of the orange ball we have, we'd be having a red, white, and blue everybody's shooting with, and we've got a throwback NBA ball.
We just really have a commemorative orange ball we're going to give away tonight. Believe it or not, this is what they used once upon a time.
Did you watch? Did you watch Semi Pro when it came out? And did it? It's like, oh, this is bringing back some memories, or was it like, this is trash? What are we doing?
A little of both. There was a great sports writer, Billy Reed, who you all may recall. He died a few years back, but he was sort of at the height of his career during the Colonels. And he and my mom and I went. And we went to dinner after, went over to Rafferty's. And I just remember Billy saying, I don't know why they felt like they had to make up stories to be funny in this movie. The actual ABA stories were much crazier and much funnier, actually. So,
yeah.
but I knew as soon as I saw Will Ferrell with the headband and the hair, I thought he's playing Johnny Newman, who played for the Memphis. And sure enough, I think it was based on his character, at least the way he looked. And he did. Will Ferrell's a great. He did pretty much look like Johnny Newman. he was a character. He played for a bunch of teams, but he could score 20, 25 points a game, was a big shot. And there were some characters in the ABA, and there were some hilarious stories, but there were also some amazing players and some great teams. And that part never got told well. That's why Soul Power, the documentary, is so important. Most people know the ABA from the Will Ferrell
Semi-Pro.
movie, Semi-Pro. They were like, Semi-Pro? Come on, we were. Because when the Colonels won the championship, and this was the story I shared, and I didn't know all the details about this until recently, about the ring, but my father called the owner of the Golden State Warriors a couple days later and said, we want to challenge you all to a world championship game. And we'll even put up $1 million, winner take all, which in today's, money would be about $6-7 million. not bad. And he said, before you answer, I just want to tell you something. We haven't had our championship rings made yet, and we normally put ABA champions on the rings. But if you refuse to play us, we're going to put world champions on our ring. And he said, well, let me talk to the commissioner. And he called back a day or two later and said the NBA won't let us play. And sure enough, I Googled the rings. The 75 Colonels championship rings say world champions, not ABA champions. And I think that's fitting because I think they would have won.
Yeah, I love it, especially because the documentary does a great job of showing just how slow pace and like boring the NBA was compared to the ABA, and how fast the ABA was. And it was so different than anything that was out there at the time.
Yeah. And there is a New York sports writer used some kind of AI tool to asking it who would have won a championship game those last 3 years between the ABA champions and the NBA champions. And I think they had the ABA team winning the last 3 years. I had the Colonels beating Golden State. I don't have to consult ChatGPT. I know already.
Yeah, we agree. And that's what they said, like the whole time too. You guys, up until the end of the ABA, like the Kentucky Colonels were outdrawing numerous NBA teams that entire time. So it's like the popularity of the league, I guess, was still there. Just what was the whole, just like business mindset around that time?
It was, and the other thing is, we would play exhibition games with the NBA, and each year the ABA would win more than the NBA, and that gap got bigger and bigger with each passing year. Where I think the final 2 years, ABA teams won, 65% of the games, almost 70%, but I think they won over half the games most every year. So. Maybe not the first year or two, but overall they won 60% of the time they played NBA teams. It was the ABA started in cities that weren't considered quite big enough for the NBA, but cities where people love basketball and they wanted a team and they wanted a chance. And so, teams, cities like San Antonio and Indianapolis, and Louisville, Memphis, Virginia had a team. And it was, we had no TV. The NBA at least had TV contracts. ABA just didn't. And that made it very, very hard to compete. And each year the Colonels lost money. And when my dad first got involved, there were 5 owners. There was David Jones and Wendell Cherry, who had started Humana. David Grissom, local businessman here, very successful, and my father and one other. And then over time, well, they decided that they just couldn't keep losing money. And there was a story that Wendell Cherry came into the end of year meeting and he was boasting that they only lost $500,000 this year. And he was very proud of that. And David Jones looked at him and said, when is losing $500,000 a successful year? And it was then that they decided they just weren't going to be able to make this work. And they sold the Colonels to a group in Cincinnati. And that's when the story happened that's in the documentary, where it was, and I remember it vividly. We were eating dinner. My grandfather had come over, and he asked my mom, kind of talking over me, is it true about Johnny and the Colonels? Kind of code, so I wouldn't quite understand, and my ears, perked up. What happened with the Colonels? And my mom said, well, they sold the Colonels to Cincinnati. And a few minutes after that, I could hear my dad coming in the front door. And I ran to the front door and just said, tell me it's not true. You're not going to sell the Colonels, are sorry, Dad. And I was probably tearing up. That was my life, just looking forward to, I wasn't doing homework because I was going to be a pro basketball player. I had my whole life planned out, and this
still got the jumper. Still got the jumper.
Plans. But he said later that when he saw my reaction, he realized thousands of kids across the state felt the same way. They would be brokenhearted, and how much the team meant to everyone in the state. And so he was going to try to get him back. And so I would call him at work every day and say, what are the odds? I need numbers, like he said, well, I'm working on it. And I was like, well, what are the chances? And it would start off 30-70 against, and then it got up to 40-60, then 50-50. And after several weeks, it got up to about 70-30. And then one day he told me over 90%, I think it's going to work out. So he got him back, but he was busy doing other things then and didn't have time to run the team himself. And so he turned the team over to my mom. And then she hired an all-female board of directors. And I love the story of when they had the press conference announcing that she was going to take over. A reporter asked her, so Mrs. Brown, what do you know about basketball? And she said, about as much as my husband knew about frying chicken when he took over KFC. And they were like, oh, okay.
Great lie.
Okay.
Great lie.
And I even, I was with her, very close to my mom. And about 2 days before she died, I asked her, I said, I got to ask you, Mom, did you think of that line on the spot? Or did Dad suggest that to you if you get asked that? And she thought for a minute and she said, I honestly can't remember, but your dad was pretty good at coming up with one-liners like that. So.
That's how your mom was the first female professional sports owner in history. And I believe the whole board was the first of that kind as well. What do you, just looking back on it, just how much of a trailblazer was your mother?
She was great. And she wasn't trying to be, a feminist leader or anything like that. She was just trying to do her job. And, when you're a kid and you want something done, you ask your mom. You don't ask your dad. Mom's going to get things done for you, And so I thought, this is good. This is probably a good move. And so she hired women leaders from across the city. And there was an auto dealership, Coil, I think was the name. They donated red, white, and blue Corvettes to each of the board members, and they just drove all over town. These red, white, and blue Corvettes, and these women, they out hustled the men, and they were on a mission, and they sold tickets. They would have teas, like tea as in coffee and tea parties, and tell their friends, this team's important. We got to keep them here, but in order to keep them here, we got to buy tickets. Go tell your husbands that buy season tickets. And they broke the ticket season sales record the next year, the first year after my mom took over, and the all-female board of directors. And then the second year, they won the ABA championship and broke ticket sales again. And but tickets were not that expensive back then, $6-8 or less. And we had no TV money. And there were always giveaways to get people to come in. So we still weren't making money. But it's an incredible story, especially back in 1973, 4, 5, or 4, 5, and 6, because there had never been, I think, a woman who owned a pro basketball team. And she just handled it with such class. I mean, the coach quit, the general manager quit because he didn't want to work for a woman. And, she just, didn't think anything about it and just kept on going. And then brought in Hubie Brown. And I remember, and they brought in Hubie because he had coached. He was the assistant coach at the Milwaukee Bucks, where they had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the Colonels were building a team around Artis Gilmore, who was similar to Kareem, and they thought, who better to coach the Colonels than Hubie Brown? And the Colonel's office was out by the fairgrounds, and my mom would pick us up from school, and then we would go to the Colonel's office and do homework or just piddle around until she was done and ready to take us home. But one of those days, this gentleman named Hubie Brown was there for an interview, and they walked into the main office and closed the door. But I was ready to go home. I was getting kind of fidgety. I'd been at school all day, and I kept knocking on the door saying, how many more minutes until we go home, Mom? And she said, just a few more minutes, honey. Just give us 10 more minutes. I was like, oh, okay. And so I waited about 5 minutes, and I knocked again. I was like, I want to go home. Come on, how many more minutes? She said, just a few more minutes, sweetheart. And then I knocked a third time, and Hubie answered and said, young man, I'm talking to your mom, and we'll be finished with our meeting when we're finished. And do not knock on this door again. And I thought, my goodness. And I just remember on the way home thinking, I sure hope you don't hire that mean man to be our coach. I didn't like him at all. He was, but thank goodness she did. Thank goodness he said yes, because without Hubie, I don't know that we would have won the championship. He was the secret sauce that kind of brought everybody together. He was a great coach, a great basketball mind. He brought the discipline and focus to that team. And he had a system, and he stuck to his system. And he made the Colonels a great team. And he said that championship team, he thought, was the greatest team that had ever taken a basketball, that stepped on a hardwood floor, something like that. Now, I don't know if he would say that today, all these years later, because he's still doing commentary, if you can believe it. But that meant a lot to the Colonels, that the legendary Hubie Brown thought the 75 Colonels were the greatest team, or one of the greatest basketball teams of all time. And we had 4 Hall of Famers, if you count Hubie. We had Artis, Dan Issel, and Louis Dampier, and many other great supporting.
So John, you mentioned Artis Gilmore, and
yes.
I mean, I guess you arguably he remains one of the greatest ABA players of all. Would you say that? Okay.
Oh, for sure. And if it weren't for Dr. J, Artis would have been the star of the ABA for sure. And he was still an absolute superstar, but Dr. J just had that style thing going, and sort of eclipsed him. But he was every bit the epic player that you're describing.
He was a big just like myself. So
yes.
Like, what do you think made him so special and so great?
I think he was such a calming presence on the team. I mean, when you got a guy who's 7'2" inside, you just don't worry as much. You know, he's going to take care of things for you. And he's up. He led the league in rebounding and scoring. I think his rookie year, he was MVP, maybe. Came in from Jacksonville. And the shame about Artis was, he came in the league. He was in Kareem's shadow, and then in terms of the big men, and then the ABA, there was Julius Erving. But if his career had been timed slightly differently, where he wouldn't have been kind of in Kareem's shadow or Dr. J, he would be, every time you debate who are your 10 players, the greatest of all time, he would be in that mix. And championship game, he had 31 points and 28 rebounds, and he was unflappable. He just never lost his cool, and he just felt like when Artis was in the game, he was going to take care of things. And he did it. He did it quietly. He didn't draw attention. He didn't demand attention. He was just always such a gentleman. and he could have made a lot of noise, but that just wasn't who he was. He just, you know, we were just so proud to have him on our team, and he was just so integral. Dan Issel was the all-time leading scorer at UK, and Louis Dampier was a former UK star. So, you know, that fans had a tie to them personally. They cheered for him at UK. And Artis came from Jacksonville, but without Artis, we would never have been a champion. And he brought out the best in everybody. And he was, you know, he was there for the team. He just wanted a championship. He was a great team player, great role model as a person. And I got to see him at the premiere, and I hadn't seen him since I was about 12 or 13. And I told him, you always told me I was going to get a growth spurt. It never happened. I'm still waiting.
Was there any runs? I know, like on the Louisville connection, you guys, like Dan Issel was a Kentucky legend at that time, especially for the Colonels. Was there any runs at Wes Unseld at all around that time?
Oh yeah, you know that there probably should have been, because that was one of the things that really helped with attendance. If you had local players, you know, we had Ron Thomas, I think, the plumber. I think he played at U of L. Everybody loved Ron. He just hustled so hard, but he was also from here. You know, you felt like you had a connection to him, and that's the thing about these players would come to these teas and stuff. They would come to the events that the women would put on, and they would talk about the team. I mean, there's no NBA player that would do that today. They'd call their agent and say, "What is this? I'm not trying to sell season tickets. That's not in my contract." But they were part of our community, and you'd see them around town, and they didn't make a lot of money. Some of them have other jobs, you know, but it was, you know, they didn't make anywhere near the money that players do today, even adjusting for inflation. But they were just, you know, they lived in neighborhoods, everybody else did, and but you were just so proud to, you know, of the Colonels. And that night we won the championship, the whole city just was electric, you know, as we felt like world champions too, you know, and we had the Colonels to thank for that.
In that documentary, you got to go back and watch that with your mother too. The final game before that, just what did that mean? Getting to watch the game of your childhood again one more time. Just what did that mean?
I couldn't believe. I mean, I didn't know what they were doing. They took us into this room, and the lights were off, and then they just ran the film, and it was a lot of highlights, stuff that we thought there's no way that film still exists. But this crew was unbelievable, and they found footage that we had forgotten about. And then when they started playing the championship game, that was just really powerful. And they showed my mom and my dad being thrown in the shower, the Colonel, just the whole, you could see Freedom Hall was full, and people, you know, we kind of stormed onto the floor. I'll never forget that countdown, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I had been waiting for that so long, just like so many other young people in Kentucky and so many older fans. And we finally got our moment. And no one was leaving. Everybody was staying around to congratulate the team and to just hold on to that night. I mean, it was just, it was, you know, other than the birth of my children and getting married, it was one of the 4 or 5 highlights of my life. You know, we went to a party at one of the friend's house, and I remember finally I fell asleep around 4 in the morning under an air hockey table. But I tried not. I didn't want to go to sleep. I wanted to stay. I didn't want to go to sleep. And they even had they somehow got the footage of at the very end, after they'd thrown everybody else in the shower, Ted McLean and Gene Littles and Bert Averett picked me up, and Ted threw me in the shower because my dad had traded for him the year before, and when he was asked by the media why Ted McLean, he gave me the credit. He said, well, I was watching a game with my son, and he said, Ted McLean plays both ends of the court. I don't even know why I would have said that. I was trying to impress my dad with something I'd heard a commentator say, but he took it to heart and he traded for Ted. And so Ted gave me some credit for being on the team when I got thrown in. And to get to see that was just, I mean, it was incredible. And to be there with my mom, who was in the final months of her life, and getting to see this too, knowing how much this meant to her was just a remarkable moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, that actually brought up a story of McLean. You told me a story yesterday, actually, about you having somebody over to your house and working through. Can you just tell that story? Just how much the business has changed from finding players from then to just the recruiting world now.
Yes, I mean recruiting now. I mean it starts. We've got, Rondo son is. He's probably already being considered an NBA prospect. And by the way, I've gotten to play against him a few times at the Y. He's every bit as good as they say. He's amazing. But I remember one night, it was about 8 or 9 at night, and David Vance, who was the general manager, came by our house with this gentleman named Jim Bradley. And the Colonels were trying to decide whether or not to sign him. And my dad and David let me sit in while they talked to Jim. And so we sat in the living room and talked for about half an hour. And then it was dark out. And my dad said, yeah, well, Jim, let's see what you got. And he had on like platform shoes, dress clothes. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, let's go out back. We got a basketball goal. My son shoots on. Let's go out there and we shoot. I'm going to see you shoot around. And he's like, okay. So we had a floodlight that we shone onto the backboard. And then I got out a couple of balls and I was shooting too, because I'm trying to impress my dad and Jim and David. And I'm thinking now in retrospect, Jim Bradley saying, this kid, what is he doing? This is my moment. I'm either going to go pro or not. Would he get out of my way? I got to do something here.
Yeah.
And I just remember he took a few shots. I think he dunked it in his dress shoes. And my dad said, yeah, let's sign him up. And he's on the team. And he was a very gifted player. And I think Dan Issel once said about him, if you had my heart in his body, we'd have the best player in the ABA. But could you imagine? And at the when the Colonels won the championship, they panned to him. He's the one with the big cigar. He's smoking a big cigar. That was Jim Bradley. But could you imagine an NBA team signing up a new player like that? Come on over. Let's see what you got. Okay. Yeah. Let's sign him up. But as the ABA, they did things differently, and in some ways it was a little nutty, but in other ways it was kind of great too, because anything was possible.
For sure.
Yeah.
Terrence, you got the next?
Yeah, because just kind of add on to that, because there was like no film. I mean, you couldn't just get any type of film on players. You kind of had to watch them live and direct. And it kind of makes sense, because now you got the workouts, you got combines, you got Portsmouth, you got so many just things that you have to do. And even now, more now, because social media, a lot of the teams are going off maybe your following and things of that nature. So it's pretty interesting to just hear how that process goes.
It's like a true diamond in the rough find right there.
Yeah, it's like, because you can't really tell just by I'm gonna dunk in some dress shoes, and but he went
They
out
would have
there.
picked up you in a heartbeat. You would have been great. You would have fit right in with ABA Terrence. There's no
Ooh,
doubt about it.
Terrence Jennings
Yeah,
next to Artist Gilmore. Good luck getting in
man,
that paint.
man, it would have
Yeah.
been a
All
wrap,
right,
man.
Doc. Nice job. Let me show you how this is really done for the slam
I don't
dunk
know about
contest.
Dr. J. It would have probably took me a little time because I was a pretty good shot blocker and I could hang too, but Dr. J, I gotta, it's crazy, man. But yeah,
You'd
for
have found
sure.
your niche.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So you
Yeah.
ended up when you were 32 years old, I believe you were the second youngest Secretary of State. Just
Yeah.
what when you're going into 32 years old, just what was the whole
Yeah.
thought process of, I'm ready to be Secretary of State of Kentucky?
Well, I was desperate to avoid the practice of law. I'd gone to law school and I really like law school, but as a friend of mine told me once, he said, "You're just not a big enough asshole to be a great attorney." So I take that
Yeah.
as a compliment. I didn't want to practice law. I worked in business, and I had some friends urge me on, and I was really thinking about it, but torn. And that the night before I filed, I watched an interview with my grandfather, who had run for office 22 times and only won 7, but he was kind of my hero. And the interviewer asked him, she said, "You had many failures in your life. Do you feel like you failed in politics?" And he said, "No, honey. The only time you fail in life is when you fail to try." And like, "Oh, okay." And she said, "Well, then, given that definition, how do you feel?" And he said, "Well, on that count, I feel like I took about every opportunity I could. I didn't turn down anything, but I kept thinking about that night. The only time you fail in life is when you fail to try." And the next day I got up and went to Frankfurt and filed, and I was scared to death. I was like, "What have you done?" My mother said to me that night, "Are you out of your blanking mind? What were you, because she had a little path for her son that was, that she had kind of planned out. But I'm glad I took the chance, and I loved it, and I was fortunate enough to win. But still to this day, anytime I'm on because when I was younger, like in high school, my high school yearbook, I have almost no activities because I was afraid to try. I was afraid I would try, and what if I'm just average? It'd be easier to not do anything and just tell myself I could have done that if I wanted to. But as an adult, I don't want to. I don't want to go through life like that. That's too small. So I want to take some chances. And I tell my kids, if you're not failing often, you're not trying hard enough in life. So go out there and fail at something today, and then tomorrow maybe you'll succeed. But if you don't mark up a bunch of L's, you're not living hard enough.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Got me goosebumps right there. I love
Yeah.
that. But we appreciate you
Yeah.
for joining us. Thank you for
Thank you
50
very much.
years since the
Yeah.
ABA NBA merger. One more last question that I have,
Sure.
just kind of going back to the Colonel. Did the Kentucky Colonels get its name from the Colonel, or just how did your father get involved with KFC? That's one thing I've always wanted to know.
Well, very same way I became Secretary of State, he was looking to get out of the practice of law. He couldn't sit still long enough to read a case or write a memo or brief. And he met the colonel, who was friends with my grandfather, who was a great attorney. And he had asked my father to do some contract work for him. And my dad was looking at his business, which was, he just had all these receipts in the back of his car, and he would get a few cents for every chicken sold in these diners all over the South. But there were no freestanding Kentucky Fried Chickens. There are only a few. And while working for him as his attorney, my dad thought, I think I can make more money with this guy than I can practicing law. And so my my mom had a roommate who they knew this gentleman in Tennessee who had some money and would invest in things. And they went and met with him. His name's Jack Massey. And he agreed to put up $2 million to buy out Colonel Sanders, and then gave my dad 40% to run it. And so the first 4 years, Kentucky Fried Chicken was headquartered in Tennessee. And they got big enough where my dad told Jack, "This just we're too big. We're international, and you can't have Kentucky Fried Chicken in Nashville, Tennessee." So they eventually moved it back to Louisville. But he was there for, I think, 8 years total. And the burger wars had started in the early 70s, and he thought chicken wars would be next and to get out while he was on top. But it turned out Kentucky Fried Chicken did just fine those next 50 years.
A little bit.
Wish he'd stuck with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I ate Popeyes last night, but don't tell me.
We'll take that out.
Oh man. Go ahead, Blake.
Oh no, just thank you for joining us. Is there anything that you'd like to just shout out or plug before we let you leave?
Just thank you all. I love your show. Love what you do. Thanks for bringing basketball alive here in the Ville. And another shout out to Sheet 360 for the great basketball community they created and promote every day. So thank you all both.
Ever step in that facility right there.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you so much, man. Yes, sir.
Hey, let's get one more look at that trophy. One more look at that trophy.
Oh yeah. Let's get the trophy in. Yeah.
There we go. Let's get this out of the way.
Yeah.
There it is, right there.
ABA championship right there.
That's right. And world champions. Remember?
World champion. Yeah, not ABA. Yeah. Check that ring. World champions. Warriors were scared.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.